June 2010. Natanz, Iran. Deep beneath the desert floor. The air in the enrichment hall is filtered, sterile and cold. Row after row of IR-1 centrifuges, tall, silver cylinders, spin in a delicate, high-speed ballet. They are reaching speeds of 63,000 revolutions per minute, separating isotopes with the precision of a Swiss watch. To a casual observer, it is a masterpiece of engineering. To the Iranian scientists in the control room, it is the pride of a nation. Then, the sound changes. A technician pauses, his coffee forgotten. He leans toward the reinforced glass. There is a vibration, a low, rhythmic thrumming that shouldn't be there. It starts as a hum, then escalates into a mechanical scream. One by one, the centrifuges begin to shake. They are exceeding their design limits, spinning faster and faster, pushed by an invisible hand toward a breaking point they were never meant to reach. He sprints to his console. His eyes scan the monitors. According to the Siemens control software, everything is perfect. The pressure is stable. The frequency is normal. The cooling systems are green. The screen tells him a lie. Outside the glass, the reality is a nightmare. Centrifuges are shattering. Metal casings are tearing apart like wet paper. Shrapnel whistles through the hall as the machines self-destruct in a deafening cascade of silver and steel. The room is filled with the acrid smell of ozone and the silence of a ruined ambition. The scientists are baffled. They replace the machines. They check the power. They blame faulty parts. They fire the engineers. They do not realize that the killer is already gone, and it never even had to break a lock. For months, an invisible ghost had been living inside their private air-gapped network. It had been watching. It had been learning the exact rhythm of their work. And when the time was right, it struck with a surgical precision that redefined the meaning of war. It wasn't a bomb. It wasn't a missile. It was 500 kilobytes of data. How do you destroy a nuclear program without firing a single bullet? How do you bypass the most secure air gap on the planet using nothing but a thumb drive and a dream? This is the story of Stuxnet, the world's first digital ghost, and the day the internet finally touched the physical world. To understand the shattered silver in the desert of Natanz, we have to look back to the windowless rooms of the mid-2000s. The geopolitical stage was a tinderbox. Satellite imagery had revealed a massive, subterranean construction project in central Iran, buried under 30 feet of reinforced concrete and stone. The intelligence was clear. Iran was racing toward the sun. They were enriching uranium at a pace that suggested a weapon was no longer a question of if, but when. In Washington and Tel Aviv, the air was thick with the scent of a looming war. Diplomacy was a carousel of empty promises and broken treaties. Sanctions were nothing more than ink on paper that the centrifuges ignored as they continued their relentless spin. Israel was fueling its jets, preparing for a massive preemptive airstrike that many feared would ignite a third world war. The world needed a third option, a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer, something that could stop a nuclear program without a single mushroom cloud appearing on the horizon. The operation was born in the shadows, christened with a name that sounded more like a sporting event than a digital assassination. Operation Olympic Games. It was a marriage of absolute necessity between the NSA and Israel's Unit 8200. But the challenge they faced was considered impossible by every standard of the time. The Natanz enrichment plant was air-gapped. It was a digital island, completely disconnected from the public internet. There were no servers to hack from a distance, no emails to phish, no back doors to exploit from a basement in Maryland. To kill the heart of the machine, you had to walk through the front door. The engineers realized they couldn't fly over the walls. They had to hitch a ride. They needed a parasite. They needed something that could live on the only thing that still crossed the threshold of a high-security facility: the human element. The humble USB thumb drive. In secret labs tucked away in the American desert, the team built a mirror image of the Natanz facility. They acquired the exact same Siemens S7-300 industrial controllers, the brains that managed the centrifuges, through front companies and black market deals. They spent years watching these machines. They learned their heartbeat. They learned exactly how much pressure the pipes could take, and exactly how fast the rotors could spin before the metal began to fatigue. They weren't just writing code. They were sculpting a ghost. The resulting malware, which would later be known as Stuxnet, was a masterpiece of digital malice. It was incredibly heavy, nearly 500 kilobytes of pure complexity. Most significantly, it contained 4 zero-day exploits. In the world of cybersecurity, a zero-day is a vulnerability that is unknown to the software's creator, a secret door that has never been locked. Usually, a hacker will spend years finding just one. Stuxnet used 4. It was the digital equivalent of an elite commando team equipped with invisible suits, master keys to every room, and the floor plans to the vault. But even with the code perfected, the question remained: how do you get a scientist to pick up a digital virus and carry it into the most secure room in their country? The plan was as simple as it was cynical. They didn't target the facility's firewalls. They targeted the parking lot. They targeted the contractors. They waited for a single person to be careless for just 1 second. The trap was set. The code was live. And the world was about to learn that in the 21st century, a line of text could be more destructive than a 1,000-pound bomb. The infection began not with a siren, but with a click. A technician, perhaps tired after a long shift, or simply distracted by the mundane details of his day, took a thumb drive from his pocket. Maybe he found it in a parking lot, or perhaps it was given to him by a trusted contractor who had no idea his own laptop was a carrier for a digital plague. He plugged the drive into a workstation on the internal Natanz network. For a fraction of a second, a tiny light on the plastic casing flickered. The ghost was inside. Stuxnet didn't behave like a normal virus. It didn't try to delete files or steal passwords. It didn't slow down the computer or pop up annoying advertisements. It was a professional. It sat quietly in the background, moving through the network with a chilling, calculated grace. It used its 4 zero-day exploits to hop from one machine to another, searching for its victim. It ignored thousands of office computers. It was looking for a very specific heartbeat: the Siemens Step 7 software. It was a digital sniper in a crowded room, ignoring everyone until it saw the target in its crosshairs. Once it found the industrial controllers, Stuxnet did something terrifyingly brilliant. It didn't attack immediately. It waited. For 13 days, the worm did nothing but listen. It recorded the normal, healthy vibrations of the centrifuges. It memorized the electrical frequencies, the valve pressures, and the cooling rates. It learned what peace looked like in Natanz. It was building a mask. In the control room, the Iranian scientists watched their screens with confidence. The monitors showed a sea of green. The graphs were steady, the numbers within perfect tolerances. But behind that digital veil, the worm began to move. It initiated a man-in-the-middle attack on the very sensors meant to protect the facility. It began to feed the scientists a pre-recorded loop of the past 13 days. The screens showed a lie. The reality was a massacre. Deep in the enrichment halls, Stuxnet began to play with the machines like a cruel god. First, it commanded the centrifuges to speed up, pushing the rotors to 1,410 Hz, a frequency that caused the carbon fiber tubes to stretch and vibrate toward their breaking point. Then, just as the metal began to scream, it suddenly throttled them down to a crawl. The machines weren't built for these wild swings. The physical stress was immense. The scientists were trapped in a psychological nightmare. They stood before their consoles, seeing reports of perfect operation, while just a few yards away, they could hear the unmistakable sound of machinery disintegrating. They saw the silver shrapnel. They saw the ruined husks of months of work. Yet, according to the world's most advanced monitoring software, nothing was wrong. They began to doubt their own senses. They began to doubt each other. Was it sabotage by a physical mole? Was it a flaw in the Iranian manufacturing process? Was the Siemens hardware itself cursed? The tension in the facility became unbearable. Scientists were interrogated. Security protocols were tightened until the air was thick with suspicion. They searched for a traitor among the staff, never realizing that the traitor was the very code they used to run the plant. The beauty of Stuxnet was its patience. It didn't destroy everything at once. It broke a few dozen centrifuges, then vanished. It waited for the Iranians to replace them, then struck again. It was a slow-motion demolition, a grinding war of attrition that frustrated the brightest minds in Iran. They were fighting a ghost they couldn't see, using tools that were lying to their faces. But the creators of Stuxnet had made one small, perhaps inevitable mistake. A piece of code this complex, this aggressive, is hard to keep on a leash. And soon, the digital ghost would find a way to escape the desert and walk out into the sunlight of the global internet. The ghost could not be contained. It happened because of a simple, human error, the very thing the attackers had relied on to get the virus in. An Iranian engineer, his work finished for the day, disconnected his laptop from the Natanz network and took it home. He didn't know that inside his machine, a dormant predator was waiting for a bridge. When he plugged that laptop into his home internet connection, the air gap was breached from the inside out. Stuxnet was free. It began to spread across the globe with terrifying speed. It wasn't a targeted strike anymore. It was an epidemic. It hit thousands of computers in India, Indonesia, and the United States. But for most of the world, it was a nuisance, a strange bug that caused computers to restart or slowed down local networks. Most antivirus programs barely noticed it, until it landed on the desk of a man in Belarus, June 2010. Sergei Ulisen, a researcher for a small security firm in Minsk, received a complaint from a customer in Iran. Their computers were caught in a reboot loop, crashing over and over again. It looked like a routine piece of malware. But as Ulisen began to dig into the code, his heart rate quickened. He found the 4 zero-day exploits. He found the stolen digital certificates from Realtek and J-Micron, reputable companies, used to make the virus look like legitimate software. This wasn't the work of a teenager in a hoodie. This was the work of a superpower. Ulisen shared his findings with the global cybersecurity community. In a windowless lab in Culver City, California, 2 researchers at Symantec, Liam Omerchu and Eric Chien, took up the trail. For weeks, they lived on caffeine and the cold glow of their monitors. They were dissecting a digital alien. "What is this thing doing?" Omerchu wondered, his eyes bloodshot from staring at assembly code. They realized the virus was looking for a very specific configuration of Siemens hardware. But it wasn't just stealing data. It was looking for frequency converter drives. Specifically, drives that controlled motors spinning at exactly 807 Hz and 1,210 Hz. Then came the beat drop moment. Chien and Omerchu looked up the specifications for those frequencies. They didn't lead to a factory or a power plant. They led to one thing: high-speed gas centrifuges used for enriching uranium. The room went cold. "This isn't code," Chien whispered. "This is a blueprint for a physical attack." They were looking at a weapon that had been designed to physically tear a building apart, using nothing but ones and zeros. It was the first time in history that a computer virus had been used to achieve a kinetic, military objective. The boundary between the digital world and the physical world had vanished. As the news broke, the intelligence community went silent. No government claimed responsibility. The US and Israel remained tight-lipped, but the evidence was written in the code. The complexity was so vast, requiring knowledge of nuclear physics, industrial engineering, and elite-level hacking, that it could only have been built by a nation-state. The Iranians finally realized what had happened. They purged their systems. They replaced their machines. They claimed the attack had failed, but the damage was done. Not just to the centrifuges, but to the very idea of security. The digital Hiroshima had occurred, and the fallout was starting to drift across every border on Earth. The world had entered a new era of warfare, where the most dangerous weapon in an arsenal isn't a missile. It's a thumb drive in the hands of a distracted employee. The ghost had been caught, but it had already changed the rules of the game forever. The silence that followed the discovery of Stuxnet was louder than any explosion. In the high-tech corridors of the NSA and the secret bunkers of Unit 8200, the mood was somber. They had achieved the impossible, yes. They had set back the Iranian nuclear program by years without losing a single soldier. But they had also lost their most valuable secret. The perfect weapon was now public domain. Its source code was being downloaded, dissected, and studied by every intelligence agency and every bored teenager with an internet connection from Moscow to Beijing. They had shown the world that the digital air gap was a myth. They had provided a masterclass in how to weaponize the infrastructure of modern civilization. The fallout was immediate. The Iranians didn't just rebuild their centrifuges, they built a digital army. Stung by the humiliation of Natanz, Tehran poured billions into its own cyber capabilities. They realized that they didn't need a nuclear missile to hurt their enemies. They just needed to learn from the ghost that had haunted them. In 2012, the world felt the first tremor of the retaliation. A virus called Shamoon tore through Saudi Aramco, the world's most valuable oil company. In a matter of hours, 35,000 computers were turned into useless bricks, their hard drives wiped and replaced with an image of a burning American flag. It was a crude, brutal attack compared to the surgical precision of Stuxnet, but the message was clear. The era of digital peace was over. The gates were open. Cyber warfare had moved from the shadows of espionage into the mainstream of national defense. Suddenly, every nation on Earth looked at their own power grids, their water treatment plants, and their air traffic control systems with a new, paralyzing fear. If a line of code could shatter a nuclear centrifuge, it could just as easily turn off the lights in a hospital or contaminate the water supply of a major city. Our world is built on a foundation of Siemens controllers and industrial software, the very things Stuxnet had turned into weapons. We had built a society on top of a digital glass floor, and Stuxnet had just handed everyone a hammer. Experts call this the Stuxnet moment, the point of no return. Before 2010, the idea of a cyber war felt like science fiction, something reserved for Hollywood movies. After Stuxnet, it became a line item in every national budget. Governments began stockpiling zero-day exploits like they used to stockpile nuclear warheads. A new arms race had begun, fought not with steel and uranium, but with logic bombs and encrypted payloads. The creators of the worm had hoped to prevent a war. Instead, they had simply changed the terrain upon which all future wars would be fought. The digital ghost was no longer just in the desert of Iran. It was in the wires beneath our streets. It was in the servers that managed our lives. It was everywhere, waiting for the next click, the next thumb drive, the next human mistake. The desert wind still sweeps across the sands of Natanz, and the centrifuges, now newer and more numerous, continue their relentless, high-speed spin. On the surface, It seems as though the Iranian nuclear program has simply absorbed the blow and moved on. But the silence that once protected our most vital infrastructure has been shattered forever. Stuxnet was more than a successful mission. It was a demonstration. It proved that a weapon doesn't need to be heavy, visible, or even particularly loud to change the course of history. Today, the source code of that digital ghost is the foundation of 1,000 newer, more aggressive predators. We live in a world where the power grids of cities, the steering systems of ships, and the cooling pumps of reactors are all governed by the same logic that Stuxnet turned into shrapnel. The blueprint is out. The lesson has been learned. And the arms race of the 21st century is no longer about who has the biggest bomb, but who has the most creative code. As you look at your own phone or laptop, remember that the invisible threads connecting us are also the wires that can be used to bring us down. The digital Hiroshima has already happened. We are simply living in the fallout. The next time a light flickers, a machine groans, or a screen tells you a lie, ask yourself, is it just a glitch? Or is a ghost from the desert finally knocking on your door? In the age of cyber warfare, and the most dangerous thing you can do is believe that you are safe just because you cannot see the enemy.